We start our story with our protagonist, Hank Rogers. He's the owner of Bulletproof Software. He's trying to get a loan to invest in a video game, but Eddie, the bank manager, is not buying it. He wants to know why he's taking all this risk for a simple game. So, it's flashback time. The year is 1988 in the Consumer Electronics Show hosted in Las Vegas. We see Hank promoting his new game called Go. It's a type of chess game but way harder. His sales are not doing too good, but he sees a crowd hovering around a computer game. He goes over to investigate, and he finds out that the name of the game is called Tetris. Hit that intro. We see Hank trying the new game. He's hesitant at first, but once he starts playing, you can see something changed in him. He tells Eddie that he only played for 5 minutes and that was enough for him to see falling blocks in his dreams. He says this game is not just a game, it stays with you. It's art, math, poetry, working in magical synchronicity. In short, the best game ever made. Of course, Hank saw this as an opportunity he couldn't let pass by. So, he asked about the rights for Tetris. The salesman tells him that the rights are owned by Microsoft worldwide. This excited him because right after he got the rights for PC, game console, and arcade in Japan. Now, let me tell you about the true beginnings of the game Tetris. It all began with a guy named Alexey Leonidovich Pajitnov in Russia. By day he was a programmer for the government working for Elorg, and in his spare time he was working on a game using geometrical shapes. His computer, called the Electronica 60, didn't even have a graphics card. His falling blocks were parentheses pushed together. Later, him and a group of buddies worked together to make it IMB compatible, which introduced the game to color, better graphics, 8-bit music, and floppy disks, which were copied and distributed for free to anyone that wanted to play the game. Now, back in the day, the Soviet Union was called the Iron Curtain, so it was hard to get anything in or out from. But let me introduce you to the man that made it possible, Robert Stein. He was a salesman for a software company called Andromeda. He tries to buy cheap game rights and then sell them to the highest bidder. He sent a telex, forerunner for a fax machine, to Pajitnov, stating that he wanted to secure the rights to sell Tetris as a computer game in the West, and offered him a significant amount of money in advance. Now, Pajitnov knew that the rights for the video game were owned by the government and Elorg. Also, doing business directly with an outsider could land him in jail. So, after back and forth between Stein and Elorg, they came to an agreement. Stein, being the businessman he is, he had one name in mind to sell the game rights to. Let me introduce you to Robert Maxwell, the billionaire media tycoon and owner of Microsoft. Him and his son Kevin Maxwell, an eager young man trying to prove himself to his father and everyone else.
It's Mr. Maxwell to you, sir.
It's Mr. Maxwell to you, sir.
From Kevin, you son of a bitch.
Were excited to purchase the rights and had big plans in mind for this game. Back to Hank. He got right to work and went directly to Nintendo Japan in search to land a deal with the one and only Hiroshi Yamauchi, the president of Nintendo of that time. But instead of making an appointment, he snuck in and to his luck, bumped into Yamauchi.
What? What the fuck?
Hank pitched his idea and let him play the game. Yamauchi liked the game and was willing to buy the rights, but Hank had bigger plans in mind. He wanted to be a third-party publisher. Now, Nintendo doesn't let anyone be a publisher for them. They usually make their games in-house, but after a wonderful closing pitch, Yamauchi was convinced. After telling all this to Eddie, he asked him for a loan for $3 million.
You crazy?
Eddie's hesitant, but sees that this might be a golden egg, so he loans him the money, but ups his interest rate and wants Hank's house as collateral, which he agrees. Everything is going great up to this point, when Hank gets a call from Kevin Maxwell, telling him that they already sold the arcade rights to Sega in Japan. Even though Hank signed a contract, Kevin lets him know that they haven't signed anything on their end. This is a devastating blow to Hank, but at least he can still keep the rights to PC and game console. Hank, in fear of going bankrupt, asks Yamauchi for a lifeline. Yamauchi, seeing the determination in Hank, has an idea for him. He sends him to Nintendo America, located in Seattle. Here he is introduced to one of the best things that ever happened on this earth, the creation of the legendary Game Boy.
That's great!
Up to this point, only 10 people have seen this. Hank gets hooked, when all of a sudden, he gets an idea that will change the life of millions of people around the world.
Gentlemen, if you want to sell a couple 100,000 Game Boys to little kids, package them with Mario. But if you want to sell millions of Game Boys to absolutely everyone, young and old, around the world, package them with Tetris.
Now, Hank has to secure the rights to handheld on Tetris, but after meeting with Robert Maxwell and Stein, he finds out that they don't have the rights to handheld yet. So, the race is on. Who will get the rights first? Stein, Kevin, or Hank? Hank wants to go directly to Russia with a tourist visa, which is illegal and he could be jailed for a very long time. But because his whole family and employees are counting on him, he has no choice but to take the risk. He travels to Moscow, and upon arriving, the Soviets get suspicious right away. They take a copy of his passport and follow his every move. Here we meet Valentin Trifonov. He is the head of the Foreign Trade Department and a high-level Soviet. They saw that the game was a hit and heard the rumor that it's making a lot of money, so they want a piece of the cake too. Hank remembers seeing the name Elorg on the back of the first Tetris game, so he tries his best to find this place, but he has no luck. But one day, we get introduced to Sasha. She offers her services as a translator. Sasha finally takes Hank to Elorg, but she warns him that entering a government building without an invitation is illegal. Hank doesn't give a fuck and yells himself to the door. In the building, we meet Nikolai Belikov. He's the head of Elorg and denies that they ever sold any kind of rights besides PC. Hank explains that Tetris is a worldwide phenomenon. This intrigues Nikolai and schedules him for tomorrow morning to find out more. Meanwhile, Kevin arrives in his private jet and is greeted by Valentin. We can see he already has an upper hand in this deal. The next morning, Hank arrives in Elorg as instructed and is put in a room. Here Nikolai and Alexey arrive and start interrogating him. They are claiming that he is a thief, but Hank denies this allegation, and he further saying that the real thieves are Mirsoft and Stein. They are selling the rights to Tetris to different parties. Nikolai says that this is impossible because they only sold the rights for personal computers. Hank offers his help and advises them that they should let him see the contract to see what's going on. Here we find out that because they didn't specify what a PC is, Stein legally didn't steal from them. Here we see how Nikolai is going back and forth between Kevin, Stein, and Hank trying to beat the capitalist in their own game.
Maravillosa jugada.
Nikolai plays this beautifully and makes all three go in a bidding war. They are all asked to come back tomorrow to talk about handheld rights. Kevin meets with Valentin and offers his help in exchange for a large sum of money, so basically bribing him. Kevin turns this down, but Daddy Maxwell steps in and behind his son's back offers Valentin $400,000 when he gets the rights. He accepts. But Hank, on his way back, gets Alexey's address and visits him that same night. Alexey is scared that someone will find out that he's meeting Hank outside Elorg. But after dinner, Alexey finds that Hank and him are very much alike. They play around with his computer and later go out to a nightclub of some sort, and here's where Alexey and Hank start being friends. The next morning, Nikolai is instructed by Valentin to sell the rights to Kevin Maxwell. This doesn't sit well with Nikolai and thinks that something is off with Valentin. So, when Hank arrives, he takes him outside and tells him that he has 1 week to make a proper offer, and that video game handheld rights are up for grabs. Hank goes back, but he couldn't get the money in time. All seems to be lost when a fax arrives from Alexey explaining that Maxwell hasn't wired the money yet, so the rights are still available. He rushes to Seattle and asks both heads of Nintendo of America to pack their bags and checkbooks to go to Moscow. At Elorg, they offer them $5 million, and Nikolai is about to sign when Sasha comes in and interrupts. We find out that all this time, she was a government spy. She goes back and informs Valentin about the deal, but he doesn't seem interested. This confuses Sasha because she believes that it's the best deal for the government in general, but Valentin refuses.
George is Russia.
Back at Mirsoft headquarters, we find out that they're basically going bankrupt, but only Robert Maxwell knows this. Also, Stein signed a new contract which cut them out from the video game rights. They all race to Moscow, and here Hank and Nintendo confront Robert and his son. There's a back and forth when Hank realizes that Robert Maxwell does not have any money. Nikolai decides to sign with Hank and lets them leave, but this would not be easy because Valentin wants his cut, so he's instructed to prevent Hank and Nintendo from leaving the country with that document. Alexey offers to help them and rushes them to the airport, but right behind them are Valentin and his men. After an exciting car chase, Alexey loses the men and makes it just in time to the airport. Hank and his friends barely make it on the airplane, which takes off right when Valentin arrives. He is furious, but right there and then, Sasha comes up and arrests Valentin. He cannot believe what's going on, but Sasha explains that she told all his dirty plans to the higher-ups and unmasked the true Valentin. She says that she will do anything for her country. Back with our protagonist, we can see that everything is going great, but Hank never forgot what Alexey did for him, so sometime later, he was able to bring Alexey and all of his family to the US. And together, they formed the Tetris company. Tetris was a huge success, becoming one of the most popular games of all time. And that's it.